Director Magnificus, highly learned opponent, dear promoter, dear audience. I would like to begin this presentation by recalling the main reason I shifted my academic interest from didactics to educational policy studies. Having served as a high school teacher in Benin for about 6 years, I used to question many hierarchical decisions imposed on us teachers at the lowest level of educational chain of command. Sometimes, willy-nilly, we had to abide by these decisions. Then, while enrolled in didactics for the master's degree at the University of Oklahoma College of Education, I decided to shift to educational policy studies in order to better comprehend how decisions were made for teachers and students, who crafted those decisions and which principles they obeyed. An important thing I learned from this academic adventure was that, whether in developed or developing countries, teachers themselves were lacking in the research initiative that concerned schools. Instead, the research outputs of economists, sociologists, psychologists, and political scientists impacted most decisions that affected teachers and their students. The current study, entitled Local Actors in Top-Down Implementation of Curricular Reform in Benin's Primary Education System, is located in the vein of academic research that intends to fill this gap. I will first present the main objectives, the focus and scope of the research, then summarize the key findings and draw upon some implications. The central concern of this study has been the local appropriation of the curricular paradigm that has been promoted in Benin in the 1990s in the context of structural changes in Benin. The responsibility of the curricular reform for the declining learning outcome among students has caused division among actors of the school system and jeopardized reform receptivity and adaptation at grassroots level. Following an actor-oriented approach and considering the school district as the geographical unit of observation, this study sought answers to the question of why the countrywide implementation of the curricular reform in Benin has caused division among its grassroots actors. Combining multiple techniques of qualitative research, intensive field work, focus group discussion, observation, as well as retrospective analysis, the study pursued the following objectives. 1. Identify the characteristics of local actors who favor the curricular reform and the characteristics of those who oppose it. 2. Examine the sustainability of the curricular innovation. 3. Reflect on the available data related to policy output and outcome. And lastly, to inform future educational policies on dynamics of advocacy and resistance at grassroots level. Looking into the implementation literature of scholars such as Bardak, Lipsky, and Gwendel, and also on educational change scholars like Michael Fulham and Catherine Anderson-Levitt, this exploratory study initially faced the methodological challenge of relying on official education statistics. Thus, it evolved from the presupposition that actors in high-achieving schools would be much more favorable to the new curricula than actors in less achieving schools. While the research site selection scale identified 4 school districts in southern Benin based on this presupposition, the empirical data challenged this ambivalent framework by revealing more complexities in the attitude and the interactions of local actors toward the curricular innovation. Addressing this methodological challenge has provided room for combining insight from top-down, bottom-up, and hybrid theories of implementation, and for connecting historical perspective with empirical ones just by focusing on local actors. Having defined the contours of a research topic and addressed my methodology, I will now present a synopsis of the key findings. This research has yielded 7 main findings in both its retrospective and empirical components. First, refuting the general view about the apolitical nature of education, the retrospective analysis in Chapter 3 documents the complex relationship between education and politics. In Benin, education policy served as a double-edged sword to break or maintain political stability at different ends of the country. Resistance to the first progressive education reform initiation of an egalitarian education reform, and the decisive role of school actors in the demise of the military masses regime in the late 1980s exemplify the complexity of the relationship between education and politics. Second, the political history of education reforms in Benin reveals the structural dilemma of whether schooling should be considered a privilege for a fortunate few or a development imperative for all. Policy measures that reinforce the selective mechanism of school generate systematic exclusion with innumerable consequences, whereas popular measures embed covert discrimination. The exit option of many resourceful parents during the egalitarian École Nouvelle reform in the 1980s and the lycée student constitution of the Grosset Dossiogo reform in 1971 are illustrative of this dilemma. The third retrospective finding pertains to the disproportionate foreign influence compared to national pressure in the adoption of the new curricular paradigm in the 1990s. As detailed in Chapter 4 on educational policy convergence, the new context of democratic transition in Benin, as well as the financial and technical assistance from the international community, contributed more to policy agenda setting, adoption, and design than internal pressure by grassroots actors. Fourth, contrasted with insight from direct observation, the analytic induction of local actors' narratives yielded a spectrum of actors. This heuristic device enabled better appraisal of the various gradations of policy advocacy and resistance. Isomorphism of local actors point to the strongest end of policy-relevant knowledge, commitment, and conviction, whereas resistance and immunity of local actors characterize the weakest gradations in terms of policy-relevant knowledge, conviction, and commitment. Loyalists and satisficers are associated with advocacy, whereas conformists, conservatives, and opponents stand for resistance. Fifth, the constellation of actors across the spectrum indicates a policy paradox. Namely, the more knowledgeable and committed actors are non-practitioners, whereas classroom actors develop covert resistance. Inspectors and pedagogic counselors constitute the bulk of loyalists and satisficers, whereas teachers and principals are a majority among conformists and conservatives. Sixth, the study found that policy advocacy is a function of perceived need and a liberal vision of education, all molded in the global trend of educational policy convergence. On the other hand, policy resistance reflects a combination of three sets of factors: disappointing policy, contextual constraints, disappointing policy outcomes, and the contagion effect of organized movements. This research advances the importance of impact evaluation studies by legitimating resistance on the ground because, despite this curricular innovation, the school system failed to yield satisfactory learning outcomes for many students. The last finding informs policy sustainability by revealing that the innovative curricula survived the resistance and constraints in two ways: by structural top-down change and by incremental bottom-up change. As a structural top-down change, the innovation allows significant inputs to be introduced in the school system and becomes, de jure, mandatory to all students countrywide. As an incremental bottom-up change, the new approach is taking root with a handful of practitioners known as satisficers in this study, whose adaptive behavior warrants policy sustainability. Having summarized the key findings, let me draw some consequences and conclude this presentation. The key findings of this study arouse several reflections that could be useful in future educational policies. The first one is to acknowledge the prematurity of the curricular innovation in Benin. The policy process unfolded as if the cart were placed before the horse. This acknowledgement enables one to consider the current state of affairs as transitional, contrary to the planned transitional period of just 1 decade. The actual transitional period depends on how quickly schools acquire the enabling condition for proper implementation of a competency-based approach. The most important requirements include adequate teacher training, school-level professional development, instructional leadership of teachers, and clinical supervision. Second, Inspectors, pedagogic counselors, and their supervisors need to admit differentiation in the implementation of a competency-based approach. Instead of demanding a constraining uniformity of teaching practices along the competency-based approach, supervisors should trust the adaptive capacity of practitioners in combining insight from content-based, objective-based, and competency-based perspective to curriculum development. Lastly, in order to reduce inequities in the distribution of learning outcomes for students, this study suggests measures to ensure equal instructional time for students in both public and private sectors. Moreover, the current assessment scheme needs to be adjusted in order to stimulate students' learning effort in French language as well as in mathematics. As a concluding remark, I would insist on the necessity for effective implementation of appropriation by grassroots actors, of ownership and of adaptation of policy measures as occurred amongst satisficers in this study. While the adoption of global policy paradigms has many advantages in policy discourse, this study indicates that local realities, the weight of the status quo, and grassroots actors are also significant. Thank you, Mr. Rector Magnificus.
Thank you, dear candidate, for your explanation. We now start the official examination of your doctorate thesis. I wish you good luck. We already know that there are no relatives of yours in the room, but you are supported by many friends. So I think you will be able to defend your thesis properly. I would like to welcome two external examiners in our committee, Professor Michiel de Vries from Radboud University Nijmegen and Professor Thomas Bierschenk from Johannes Gutenberg University, Mainz. I thank them for being with us, for freeing themselves from their academic obligations, which are also always pressing in this time of the year, taking the trouble traveling to The Hague. So I'll first call upon your first external examiner, Professor Thomas Bierschenk from Mainz, to open the opposition.
Dear candidate, you have a section in chapter 3 where you talk about the history of educational reforms in Benin. So I would like you to reflect on the following proposition, that the Nouveau Programme d'études, the reforms you are talking about, are only the last of a series of educational reforms since late colonial times, and that these educational reforms resemble each other more than they differ. And I mean this in respect to their objectives, their content, their implementation problems, and also in terms of the actors who resist them and the rhetoric of resistance. So there is more similarity since 1948 to today than difference. That's my proposition.
Thank you, highly learned opponent, for this question. There are more similarities than differences. Indeed, I will challenge this proposition by revealing that the Nouveau Programme d'études is much more foreign-driven than École Nouvelle, and also than the first education reform we have, Grosset-Dossiobo reform. That is one aspect. The second aspect is that, excluding the Grosset-Dossiobo reform, which has never been implemented due to contestation and resistance, the École Nouvelle reform had not been contested by grassroots actors. Contestation and social movements in the late 1980s were related rather to claims to have much more opportunity for democracy, and they were claiming months of unpaid salaries. But the École Nouvelle reform, as related to the curriculum, the content, has not been overtly contested. That is just the nuance I want to put in this proposition. Thank you, highly learned opponent.
Are you satisfied with the answer, Professor Bierschenk?
No, I don't think I think there is room for sort of disagreement. I mean, all reforms, I mean, following your own description, by the way, since 1948, the ruralization of schools were foreign-driven. I mean, under colonial rule, I mean, that goes without saying. But you are, I mean, Grosstedt